September 1st, 1939. German troops crossed into Poland. Europe was at war again. But to truly understand why, we need to step back. Not just to Hitler's speeches or the Nazi stormtroopers, but to the years between 1918 and 1939. This period, often overlooked, holds the real answers. The seeds of the Second World War were sown in the ashes of the First, fertilized by broken promises, economic ruin, rising dictatorships, and a world unwilling or unable to act. What really started the war wasn't a single event. It was a chain of crises, each one building upon the last, until the final spark lit the fire that would consume the globe. When the First World War ended in 1918, Germany wasn't occupied by Allied armies. Its troops marched home claiming they had never truly been defeated, only stabbed in the back by weak politicians and revolutionaries. This myth of betrayal poisoned the Weimar Republic from the start. The Treaty of Versailles added fuel. Germany lost territory, its military was slashed, and it was forced to pay massive reparations, £6.6 billion to Britain and France. For a starving nation facing bankruptcy, this humiliation cut deep. Versailles created not peace, but resentment. A resentment Hitler and his movement would later harness with deadly precision. Germany's new democracy was fragile. From its birth, it faced violent uprisings from communists on the left and nationalists on the right. In 1923, the country plunged into chaos as hyperinflation spiraled out of control. People carried wheelbarrows of worthless banknotes just to buy bread. Savings were destroyed overnight. These humiliations left scars. Even though Germany stabilized by the late 1920s, the memory of collapse lingered, waiting for another crisis to shatter the system again. And when that crisis came, the nation would turn to extremism. The crash of 1929 devastated Germany more than most nations. American loans that propped up the economy evaporated. 6 million Germans were unemployed. Poverty spread and faith in democracy collapsed with it. Extremist parties surged. Among them, Adolf Hitler's National Socialist Party transformed from a fringe group into a mass movement. Hitler promised to rebuild Germany, restore pride, and overturn Versailles. Millions of desperate Germans listened. By 1933, he was appointed Chancellor. Within months, he seized absolute power, outlawed opposition, and began reshaping Germany into a war machine. But Hitler wasn't the only threat. Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935. The League of Nations, created to prevent wars, did nothing meaningful in either case. Sanctions were weak, enforcement non-existent. Aggressors learned a dangerous lesson. The international community would condemn but not act. This emboldened dictators across the globe. When Germany began openly defying Versailles, rearming its military and reoccupying the Rhineland in 1936, Britain and France protested, but did nothing. The League's impotence was no longer theoretical. It was on display for the world to see. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had risen to power even earlier, marching on Rome in 1922. His fascist regime preached nationalism, militarism, and empire. By conquering Ethiopia and intervening in the Spanish Civil War, Mussolini showed the world that dictators could act without fear. For Hitler, Mussolini's success was proof that bold moves worked, and when the two later aligned, forming the Rome-Berlin axis, fascism became a united force reshaping Europe's balance of power. The Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939 was more than a domestic struggle. It was a dress rehearsal for global conflict. Hitler and Mussolini poured in weapons, aircraft and troops to aid Francisco Franco's nationalists. Stalin cautiously supported the Republicans, while Britain and France stood aside, clinging to non-intervention. Nazi Germany tested its new Luftwaffe bombers on Spanish cities, most infamously in Guernica. The war showed two things. Fascist powers were willing to use brutal force. and the Western democracies lacked the will to stop them. For Hitler, this confirmed what he already suspected. Britain and France feared war more than they feared him. By the late 1930s, Hitler had consolidated power at home and turned outward. His first major target was Austria. Many Austrians welcomed union with Germany, and in March 1938, Hitler's troops marched in unopposed. Austria was annexed overnight. No shots fired, no resistance, no response from Britain or France. Hitler now commanded the resources and manpower of a greater Reich, and the world once again did nothing. Next came Czechoslovakia. The Sudetenland, home to a large ethnic German population, became Hitler's excuse for aggression. In September 1938, Europe teetered on the brink of war. But instead of resisting, Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flew to Munich to negotiate. The result was the Munich Agreement. The Sudetenland was handed to Germany in exchange for Hitler's promise of, well, no further territorial demands. Chamberlain returned to London declaring peace for our time. But it was an illusion. Within months, Hitler swallowed the rest of Czechoslovakia. Appeasement, meant to preserve peace, only convinced him the democracies were weak and could be bullied into submission. By 1939, Hitler's gaze shifted to Poland. He demanded the return of Danzig and a corridor to connect East Prussia with the rest of Germany. But this time, Britain and France drew the line. They pledged to defend Poland if it were attacked. Hitler now faced the risk of a two-front war. Yet, in a stunning move, he secured a pact with his sworn enemy, Joseph Stalin. The Nazi-Soviet Pact of August 23, 1939, secretly divided Eastern Europe between Germany and the Soviet Union. With Russia neutralized and Poland marked for conquest, Hitler gave the order. On September 1, 1939, German troops invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. World War II didn't begin simply because Hitler wanted more land. It began because the world failed to stop him. Versailles created bitterness. Economic collapse bred extremism. The League of Nations proved powerless. Democracies, traumatized by World War I, clung to appeasement, hoping compromise could prevent another bloodbath. Instead, hesitation and inaction emboldened aggressors. Hitler, Mussolini and Japan all tested the limits and found there were none. What really started the war was not just ideology or dictatorship, but a combination of humiliation, desperation, and the repeated failure of the international community to confront rising threats until it was too late. The years between 1918 and 1939 are not a prelude. They are the true foundation of the Second World War. They remind us that wars don't erupt suddenly. They build slowly through missteps, compromises and unchecked aggression. By the time the world woke up, the point of no return had already been passed. For students of history and for all of us today, the lesson is sobering. Peace is not preserved by ignoring danger, but by confronting it before it grows too powerful. If you found this deep dive into the forgotten years before World War II valuable, subscribe to In the Beginning and share this with others who love history. Together, let's keep exploring the stories and lessons that shape the modern world.